Hello, everybody, and welcome to another E5 podcast. I am your host for this session, Paul Meenan, and with me I have a new co-host to these podcasts. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Adrian Davey. I'm from Brighton.
So Adrian, you're from Brighton, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the electrical industry?
Okay, well, at the moment, I've gone into training, but I've been an electrician since 2004 when I qualified. Within a year, I set up my own company, went self-employed, and have been happily on my way ever since.
So 2004 you qualified and you went self-employed and now you're teaching. Was that a decision or that you wanted to go into training, or was it the challenges of the industry that made you go into training? And
Yeah, well, I never thought I'd end up here, Paul, if I'm honest with you, but I absolutely love my job. Always have done. I think being an electrician is an amazing privilege, if I'm honest with you. We get to work in people's houses and people entrust us with their electrics. And most of my clients end up being friends. I can phone them, talk to them. We have discussions about other things other than electrics, and I take care of them. But there's only so many times you can wire somebody's house, and if you do a good job, you should theoretically never have to go back. So I would say within the last 3 years, I've definitely noticed a change within the industry.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So what was when you were running your own company, what was the name of the company?
It started off as Adrian Davey Installations.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 years ago now, I thought, I've had enough of doing this. I'm going to sell the company. And obviously, being that it was Adrian Davey Installations, it was very difficult to sell that. So I came up with what I thought was a good name, Pure Electric. Started going on social media and trying to promote the business as such. But actually, what I've got was something I hadn't been counted on, and that was meeting like-minded people. Up until that point, Paul, I thought I was the only person in the world that cared about electrics and people's houses and that kind of thing.
It's the one thing I've noticed over the last few years, especially, is a lot of the guys who are the one-man bands, the self-employeds. They do. You do sit in a little bubble. You are by yourself. I mean, when I was jobbing Spark, when I had a van and I was doing stuff for British Gas, going into people's homes, it was just me and my thoughts. It was quite a lonely existence, although I had lots of gas engineers and plumbers to have loads of banter with. But when you did get a chance to engage with Sparks, it was nice to be around your own. So you were registered as Pure Electric. So if there's anybody got any outstanding CCJs or if you've got any speeding fines, it's Pure Electric of Brighton, not to be confused with Lee Ward of Dorset, who will be eventually on one of these podcasts when I can get him into the technology of Skyping. So, okay, so you were self-employed, you were looking to move your business into being sold on. You created the name Pure, which I think is quite apt given your behaviours. And now you've merged into the teaching. Now, a lot of people who speak about teaching, there is a horrid term that teachers are failed sparks, which I completely disagree with, although I have met some bad teachers. Luckily, in my unique position now, I've got to be able to say that I've met lots of brilliant, world-class teachers, people who could be earning 80 grand a year out in the field, who've chosen to give up their knowledge and their spare time to teach the new generations of youngsters. And it's very, very hard. If anybody's seen the up and coming generations, some of them, it's very difficult getting them off their phones.
Well, one of the reasons I came into it, Paul, was it was kind of by chance, actually. I had an apprentice who was at college, and I met his lecturer, and he said, we've got a job going here. You should apply, and that's how it came about. Go on.
So whereabouts are you working now then? Whereabouts are you teaching?
So I'm at Steve Willis Training in Burgess Hill.
Okay.
Obviously, I have to be careful what I say because I don't want to get into any trouble with the company. I really like it there. I've got to say they've got the right ethos about teaching.
Hmm.
They want to do a good job. They care about the learners. They care about the outcome. Um, One thing that I've kind of realized in my very short time of being there is coming back to what you said about the lecturers, is that you're choosing from a very shallow pool. You have to have somebody that's been in the industry, and out of that, you have to have somebody that wants to teach and is good at teaching. And that is very difficult. I have heard lots of stories about people that they're good at the practical, but not so good in a classroom. You get people that know science backwards and will ramble on and on and on, but the students are asleep, you know. So it's very difficult to find somebody that ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, waking them up is a big thing. I've noticed when I first went to Tresham with the GSH lads, you got Joe, who is just off the charts with the science and principles, and then Gary, who loves living in the workshop doing the practical with the lads. I don't think he ever sits down. I don't think Gary ever sits down during the days. I mean, the days I've been there, I've driven 3 hours to get there, and then he's been on his feet for 10, 11, 12 hours, and then right at the end of the day, in between all his spare time, he's filming or recording stuff, and it's an incredible commitment I've seen from lots of teachers, even the guys in Warrington, right up above Manchester. The same thing. They're in their spare time, they're in their holidays, they're in their weekends, trying to prep stuff, trying to deliver more than what the syllabus. Because a lot of modern teachers now, I mean, I found out the other week, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, the 18th edition wine regulations is not in the current syllabus for further education colleges. So they're trying to teach to it, but the learning material they've been given by the City and Guilds isn't up to date. So arc fault detection, surge protection, these teachers are having to basically do CPD to go and gain that knowledge. When I went to Swansea Gower College, and we had to deliver a surge protection briefing to the tutors because they needed that knowledge and an understanding of their understanding to be affirmed so that they could impart that to learners. And that was a real eye-opener to me, because you'd naturally assume when the regs come out, the colleges are up to date and they're at the cusp of the learning material. But that's fairly evident not the case, which is it's a massive worry for these poor lads.
Well, I have noticed it seems to take a while to filter down. It has to
Yeah,
be around for a while. People have to iron out all the mistakes. Obviously we know that the 18th edition has many mistakes in it, things that are just missing. So it takes a while for everybody to adjust and think, actually, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it.
yeah, it's also worth at this moment saying that the views expressed in this podcast may not necessarily be the views of E5 as a group, or of Adrian Davey, or as employers, Steve Willis Training Centres. This is just two blokes chewing the fat over a podcast. Anyway, right, Steve Willis Training Centres. I've been there. I did my City and Guilds 2400, their design and verification course, way back in 2003, 2004. It was a very good training centre. It was deemed, I remember, because EDF put me on the course, it was deemed very expensive, because they were one of the premier training companies in England. So if you went there, it was top-notch training. So it's good to see you're there,
Well,
because
I've
you're.
seen lots of things where they say that their scores, their percentages of pass rates, and that is very high.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. In all fairness, when I was there, I was totally blown away by the intelligence levels of the tutors, and the experience in general. To be perfectly frank, it was. I mean, I passed. It was a hard course. I mean, if anyone's done, I don't know what they call it now. It used to be the 2400. It's what, 239.
2396.
2396 now, but it was like doing the only words I can use to describe the design and verification course if anyone wants to do it, and I would recommend everybody does it. If you're 10 years off the tools, go and do that course, and it's like doing your part two City and Guilds in a week. It's like cramming everything back in. It's like dusting it all off in a week, because you
Well,
literally bounce across everything in that week. It's incredible.
Well, the good thing about doing the constant CPD and the updates in that, Paul, is that you fill in all the gaps in your knowledge. When you've done 3 years at college and then you go off out into the world, you've got very little pocketed information that you go out and then you're working from. So we need to fill in the gaps. And sometimes you have to then go out on the tools to do those jobs to then be told, actually, if you look at it this way round, you're doing it slightly wrong or you've misinterpreted something. And then you fill in the gaps, and then all of a sudden you go, "Oh, that makes sense." Sometimes it's blindingly obvious that's so simple to miss.
The thing is, though, one thing I've found with learners is in the learners I've spoken to, you see some that are super keen and thirsty and hungry, and it's, I mean, looking back now, it's great. Looking forward, when I was young, it was so difficult to understand the ins and outs, the what's, learning the terminology, understanding what was more important than the other, because there's so much industry knowledge. The first time you hear of the NIC, EIC, or the JIB, or the IET, or the IE when they were, and all these other terms and phrases, what does it mean? What context? I just need to learn to land a cable, don't I? I just need to learn to bend pipe, don't I? I just need to know the minimum cable size, don't I? Isn't that all I need to know? And for me, I was very lucky, is that I had a very good teacher who would really nag us, and sometimes you need that. He wouldn't let us out of the class until we'd memorised the British Standard number, which we hated him for. But when we're out on site, my God, it got me more money. It got me more hours in the day shift, because the minute I came out of my time, I knew more. I was working with electricians who were time served, but there was some fundamental knowledge, some scientific knowledge. I knew more than them because I was fresh. I was, hot out of college. But I definitely think the learning with time comes to it, because there are times when I will sit down and I will look back 3 years ago at a briefing or some training I did, and then I'll go, oh, I could have done that completely differently, or I'd have done that better, or I would have contextualized it this way. And I think training is an ever evolving thing, and I would recommend to anyone getting into the industry, remember one thing: if you think you're not training anymore, you're dying in this trade.
Well, I made that mistake, Paul. My goal at the very beginning was to be an electrician.
Hmm.
I chose a course which I thought would get me there. I've now discovered 15 years later that there's multiple routes into the industry, and unless you do an apprentice route, that's the one that most people class as the right way. When I was choosing, I didn't know that. I put myself through college because at the time I had a defining moment. I was working in a petrol station. It was supposed to be a temporary job. I ended up being there a year, and I thought, oh, I've got to get out of this. I need to move on. So I opened up the paper and I saw an advert for plumbing and I saw an advert for electrical, and I chose to put myself through college to enable me to get an employer. Had I known that doing a diploma route would not be as, I'm looking for the right terminology here, but as seen as the correct route, I probably would have changed my mind. I would have chosen a different route. But the idea was to get qualified, which I thought I did. I got to the end of the 3 years, job done, and that was it. I stagnated for the next 15 years.
Well, if you cast your net and went out and did a survey of electricians of various ages and stuff, because a lot of the average age of sparks isn't getting younger. I think the average age of electricians now is like 39. You're finding a lot of people who are coming in doing short courses, but they don't know there's anything wrong with doing the short courses. Everyone who comes into this industry is naive to an extent, because that's the whole point of learning and trying to get in and to earn money for your family. But if I go down to satisfy the militants listening to this podcast, because there will be some, that the JIB handbook, page 83, states the grade of approved electrician, the qualifications and training you must satisfy to have the grade of electrician: 2 years experience working as an electrician subsequent to the satisfactory completion of training and immediately prior to the application for this grade. So if you do a 3-year college course, this is basically 2 extra years before you're applying for electrician grade. You must have demonstrated competence in inspection and testing and have achieved the net advanced assessment of competence, or level 3 certificate in electrical installations for inspection and testing, and the EAL initial verification and periodic inspection and testing. Or you can then get additional 2391, alternatively EAL, or alternatively Logic Level 3 now. They're accepting Logic certification, another awarding body. There's quite a list, to be honest with you. So effectively, when you look through the GRB criteria, it's if you want to go for electrician, you need a level 3 NVQ effectively, and you need to have an AM2, but that's just for your electrician grade. To get your approved grade, you need another 2 years plus your 2391. Doesn't really mention short courses.
Well, I feel sorry about
nothing on short
people that
courses.
I feel sorry for people that choose those short courses because obviously they're available, they are there.
They
I've
don't know
got
any
my
better though.
well, do you know what? And we're all guilty of it as well because back in 2005, just as I started up my company, Part P came out, and I was working on loft conversions at the time, and the building control officer came up to me and he said, "Right, you need to be NIC now." So I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, why is that?" Told me all about Part P, and I thought, oh, "This is amazing. It's going to be just like gas. I'll happily sign up to that." So when I phoned up the NIC, and this is back when the NIC stood for something, in my opinion, they said, "Right, you don't have a testing qualification, and you need one." So I said, "What testing qualifications do I need?" And at the time, it was the old 2391, and it was about £800. I said, "Oh, that's a lot of money. 4 days off work." And she said, "Don't worry, you can do a Part P kitchen fitters course, and that will give you it's over 2 days, £400, and that will give you what you need to enroll." And at the time, I thought I thought I was being clever by choosing the kitchen fitters testing course. I thought I dodged a bullet, done the easy route. I was really pleased with myself. It's only looking back in hindsight that I feel that I've only contributed to everything that's happening to the industry now.
So what you're saying is you're a kitchen fitter then. So I've got a kitchen downstairs that needs some work. So you're more than welcome to come down anytime and give us a price for a new kitchen. That's great. I didn't realise. I thought I was interviewing Adrian. Now I'm interviewing a kitchen fitter.
And it was a basic course, Paul. It was a
Just
very
for
basic.
everybody listening as well, if you're going to research the industry, the JRB handbook is a good source of reference if you're looking at qualifications, structure, hierarchy, and all these terms like labourer, cable foreman, cable supervisor, electrical improver, which does exist. Training electrician does exist in the JRB handbook. But an electrical improver is someone who hasn't received their MVQ level 3 yet, but is working on their level 2s, and must be registered with a JRB training scheme. So the JRB, I found it really hard because when I started, I worked for a company that wasn't JRB, but I started my first year of my apprenticeship with them. Then they went bankrupt, as electrical contractors do, and then I went agency, and then I found a railway company who were JRB, and they enrolled me with the JRB to complete my apprenticeship. But once I got that enrolled with the JRB, I noticed the behaviours around me changed because a lot of the sparks who were gold card holders, the minute they realised I was a full-on JIB registered apprentice, they respected me a lot more. And the other apprentices on the jobs who weren't JIB registered, they didn't. So in that respect, I got very, very lucky. But I don't begrudge anyone who comes in and does short courses because they don't know. The whole point of coming in this industry is they don't know. And I have a very simple view, and that is everybody's got a right to feed the family. Everybody's got a right to do whatever they want in life. That's democracy 101. The one thing I will say is anyone who's come in and done the short courses, Karen Boom, bless her, she did a short course, but she served her time. She's worked with others. She's gained knowledge. She's applied her learning over a period of far more than 5 years.
But
She's got to a point where she's,
one thing I took away from that podcast, Paul, was actually she was very honest.
yeah,
And she said that when she first qualified, she didn't know what she didn't know. She by pure luck, she got in with a qualified electrician
yeah.
and learned what she needed to know from him. But again, in hindsight, looking back, she could see that it was lacking. And that's our point, isn't it? Is that at the time you think you've got this qualification, it's all ticks in the box, and you're happy. You've paid money, you've got a qualification at the end of it, and off you go. And it's only at that point you then realize that most people won't employ you because they don't see that as the recognized route.
Indeed.
Or
But
their
when you
personal experience tells them that these people don't understand the building structure, properly.
When you mentioned podcast, by the way, just for clarity, she hasn't been on the E5 podcast. She was on the Electrician's Guide to Everything podcast with Ricky and Sam, who are lovely chaps. There's a plug for the EGT guys. I recommend listening to the episode of Me in It. It's my personal favourite. And I think you find most of the E5 guys have been in there as well. So yeah, anyway, so that's Ricky and Sam EGT. So yes, she's electric. Karen Boom, she had a great podcast there. She came around to my house. She did a conversation couch with us. Amazing woman, very driven, very determined. Wants to influence young girls, support people. I love the fact that she is consciously competent. She knows her limits. She knows her boundary, and that is key to competence. Is knowing your limits and knowing your boundaries. And it's so hard in an industry where you're being bombarded with science and principles, practical installation methods, equipment, tools. It's a huge, overwhelming experience. So anyone who's done a 5 or 10 week course or 12-week course, whatever it is, or 5 days, you're kidding yourself if you think you're an electrician. And to those companies that are trying to sell it as you're an electrician, they're an absolute fucking disgrace, to be perfectly frank. And I know a lot of them now have got wise to the fact that lots of people are criticizing them, and they have now put small caveats in their small print and on their website that says this won't make you an electrician,
And you
but
may
it will.
struggle to find a job if they say that as well, and you'll
Yeah,
probably end up self-employed.
yeah, they do, and that is a massive problem because there are companies out there who shall not be named for legal reasons, who are a shower of gits, who are flogging gold card courses for thousands of pounds, who guarantee gold cards, who fast track people without realizing that the application of competence is a journey over time. You
And this
can't
is
do it in 6 months in this trade and be competent. You can't.
Well, the thing that we need to talk about there, though, Paul, in my opinion, is it's morally wrong to the people that are paying that money and doing those courses because they think they're getting something. They think they're changing a career and they're going to suddenly, everything's going to work out and be okay. But also, as well, the homeowners that are then left with these people working in their houses that may or may not be as competent as they think they are.
I think
That really gets to me.
I think it's worse than that. I think it's not just morally wrong. I think it's socially reprehensible. I think it's ethically horrendous. The trouble is there is nothing or no one in this industry that regulate. And this is another thing. This kind of gets me onto my next point. Because me and you could do an entire podcast just on training. And I think this probably won't be our first podcast where we talk about the training industry and hopefully give tips and prompts to students and people getting into the industry. But schemes, I hate the term schemes. Schemes, by their very nature, are divisive. And yet we call all of the industry bodies scheme operators. I run a Part P scheme. I run a microgeneration scheme. I run an approved contractor scheme. I fucking hate that term. And yet, the one thing for any learners listening, there is absolutely zero governing body in the electrical industry. The only persons that you could consider a governing body would be the HSE. There's none. The IET write the wiring regulations as part of a committee under license from the BSI and publish it. The NIC, EIC, the ECA, the JIB, NAPIT, they are all voluntary, these are their words, voluntary regulatory bodies. And it's worthwhile checking out Dave Watts's videos on the problems with the scheme operators. Although, in fairness, you and I have both noticed over the last year some changes from them. But sadly, schemes are a part of our industry which kind of do paper over some horrible truths in our
Well,
industry as well.
I have as you know, I had a house, brand new build, £1.8 million. My client spent on it, and he's a good friend. I've known him for about 8 years, and I told him not to buy a new build.
Yeah, I
Because
tell anyone not to buy a new build.
yeah, don't buy a new build.
Yeah.
So I told him, and I don't think he believed me. And I went along, and basically, everything that I touched, I didn't even have to look far. It was dangerous. They had 70 volts on the wet room towel rail.
Oh, that's right.
Between,
Yeah.
between the towel rail and the shower controls. And it had been like that for about 6 months. And the electrician had told them not to worry about it because it was only a small voltage. And the guy was telling me that he put a Volt pen on it, and that was his way of
Oh, well,
telling
there you go. Oh, thank
telling.
God, the Volt pen. Oh, we're saved.
Yeah. And you know what? This was the defining moment for me, Paul, because up until that point, I believed in Heart P. I wanted things. I mean, obviously, I'd seen the decline, but I wanted things to get better. I wanted them to improve. I wanted to believe. And this was the point where I realized that no one's policing the system. No one cares. I tried to get resolution for this person. It took over a year. It took me a year to come to the conclusion that no one's interested. I tried building control. They said it's a competent person scheme problem. I tried the competent person scheme. They blankly just ignored me. And it was through Stroma. I won't, I don't hold back on that. That was Stroma. They did not even contact us. They said they couldn't talk to us over the phone, so we had to email in. We both emailed in. We heard nothing back. I contacted the HSE. They said it's building control or trading standards. I contacted trading standards. They said it was building control, and building control said it was the scheme problem. And it just went round and round and round. And eventually the guy paid for it out of his own pocket. It cost him 20 grand to get it sorted.
Yeah, I actually remember that. I could hear your screams from where I live in Southend, on that little debate. So it kind of the two debates you can have are, do schemes do enough to regulate installer quality? Now you can produce guidance books. The Codebreaker is a great example of a brand new book that really helps inspectors. But the NIC on-site guide I actually think is better than the IET one, because there's more practical and pragmatic information in it. But there is a serious problem with installation quality. When I was an apprentice, I used to think the quality was pretty robust. I could maybe score industry, if you average the industry, maybe a 7 out of 10. I would now say that I don't think there's any electrician listening to this who every day when they walk into someone's house and that Mrs. Jones will say, "Oh, just I've got a problem with my light switch, and don't worry, everything else is wonderful. My electrics are great. My husband's been working on them for 35 years." And the minute you're walking through that door, you're rolling your eyeballs and you're whispering to yourself, "Oh, for frig's sake,
Every
this is going
time
to be
I
a
hear
nightmare."
that, I know exactly what I'm walking
Exactly,
into.
exactly. You walk in there and you look at the board and you see a Wilex 3036 board and you think, great, let's see if there's any bonding. And then you take the cover off and you see the main tails have been doubled up and every single circuit's been doubled up. And you think to yourself, why do I bother? And then you start looking more and you see burnt out VIR, and you just think, oh, I've opened Pandora's box, or you've got missing CPCs and
Speaker
borrowed
cable
neutrals.
used as wire.
Yeah, and the worst thing is because I've done my fair share of domestic, I have seen so many horrors, but we seem to see more and more and more horrors. But the installer quality isn't being addressed because the scheme providers, for anyone listening who doesn't know, if you register with one of these competent persons schemes, you're assessed annually. But the assessment is done on a QS, a qualified supervisor. Now, you and I both know the QS, if he's self-employed, will be the self-employed man. On a big company like EDF, for instance, it was me. But yet we employed 2,500 electricians. So I had to know what I was doing. The other 2,500 electricians didn't have to know their arse from their elbows. It didn't matter because it was my job to ensure their competence, which, as you
Mm.
can imagine, was fun. And you imagine turning around to your employers and saying, yeah, they all need upskilling or they all need additional training. Your employer's not going to listen to you.
How
So it
many
becomes,
people can you have to one QS, Paul?
oh, that's an interesting one because there used to be a rule of thumb, didn't they? Because I remember once an area engineer saying to me that it was 1 to 20, but then I had another area engineer who I loved, who's since retired. He said to me the key is in the term, because it used to be qualified manager, somebody who managed, and they changed it to qualified supervisor. And if you are on a site, then you should be supervising the installation work, not sat in an office doing paperwork.
Mm.
And a lot of the QSs I meet for small to medium companies, the non-one man bands, the qualified supervisor is never supervising on site. I mean, even on my railway, one of the first things I said when I brought on my new contractor is, "Who's my qualified supervisor?" And the look I got was, And I said, "Well, my railway is going to have a qualified supervisor on the fucking route, and if you don't, you're not going to be doing any work for me." But I had to insist upon having a QS So the employer went, all right, we'll get another bloke registered. And you're thinking, well, that system straight away is broken if you're relying on one guy.
Well, surely the role of the qualified supervisor, in my opinion, is to go out onto site,
Yeah.
make sure that the install's correct, and then at the end of the job, make sure that its second fix is correct, and then to check the certification. It must be almost like the third party scheme. You're supposed to be checking at every opportunity. And we know that that doesn't work, in my opinion. I've had lots of certificates that I've come across where people have signed off other people's work.
So, if for those listening, there is something called the Electrotechnical Assessment Specification, and it's the last one was dated July 2015, and it is the minimum requirements for a contractor to be recognised by a certification body as competent to undertake electrical installation work, design, construction, inspection, and testing. It includes minimum technical requirements for enterprise to be considered competent to carry out electrical works in dwellings in accordance with Part P. It also includes the competence requirements for registered qualified supervisors and responsible persons, requirements for Scottish building regulations, and it's been prepared by a managed committee that includes representatives of competence persons, scheme providers, trade associations, Department for Communities, Local Government, Electrical Safety Council, and the IET. The IET has accepted ownership of the specification and provides admin. So there's an IET secretary. This my big issue straight away is that committee is made up of people. None of them are on the tools.
Mm.
Not one of them are on the tools, and not one of them has held a bloody screwdriver in God knows how many years. And I guarantee you, if you go into the room, because I'm pretty sure I know a lot of people who are on those committees, they are. Some of them will be ever done an apprenticeship, people who just work in the industry for like an ECA or NIC search or whatever you want to call them, that are just almost. I didn't realise this until a few years ago. There are people who go around just being on committees.
Can I ask you a
Literally,
question, Paul?
committee members. Yes, go for it, mate.
So, I mean, obviously, I didn't qualify till 2004, so I was a bit late to the game. But when the NIC used to mean something, I mean, my first boss tried to get NIC registered, and this is a very knowledgeable man from Seaboard. He had to jump through many, many hoops to even be considered to go be NIC registered. And I can't help feeling that back when the NIC was first started, it was started by people that came from the industry, that wanted to improve the industry. They wanted to set a standard. And now when I look at the NIC, all I see is marketing people and CEOs that have come from Marks and Spencers and people that haven't worked their way up through the industry and don't know what they're looking at or what they're really talking about. Obviously, they know sales, they know figures, but we're used as commodities. We're literally just, one big commodity. And if they could get us on the FTSE 100, I'm pretty sure they would. I mean, what's your opinion of how, when the NIC first started? Was it started by those people?
So
People that cared?
if I remember rightly, the NIC, the original NIC, the one that's 70 odd plus years, there was something called the National Electrical Register or Council or something for electrical installers. That was basically the beginnings of the ECA, if I remember right. I'm a bit rusty on this now because I haven't looked at it in a while, but effectively the origins of the ECA came from a contracts organisation. They need to have a register for electricians and an inspection council for it. Now, the NIC, as they stand at the moment, are only, 13 years old? Because, that's it, there we go, I remember now. So the current Electrical Safety First, who are a non-for-profit charity, they used to be called the Electrical Safety Council. And they were formed from the non-for-profit, which was the original register for electricians 75, 76 years ago. So the NIC, EIC were formed from the National Register of Electricians. They got to a point where about 13, 14 years ago now, they became the electrical, because they were non-for-profit, the Electrical Safety Council. And they're now the Electrical Safety First. So when you look at Electrical Safety First, they're the original NIC, EIC. The current NIC, EIC are a marketing organisation. They are a brand.
Yeah.
Which is, and they actually put, and if you do your research, 75% of the funding for Electrical Safety First comes from the NIC, EIC anyway. The other 25% is, oh yeah, and it's just a weird web of fundraising activities. But all you do is, it's like if I called, so let's say E5. Imagine I created E1, E2, E3, E4, E5. It's all the same thing. But I go, no, they're independent. No, they're not. They all sit in the same committees.
We all
You
link from the
used to
same
be,
bowl.
E1 used to be E5. Come on. It'd be like if I took over as chairman of E1 and we became a competent person scheme. My origins is in E5. So it's a very interwoven web, all of this. And when you look at the ECA, who obviously own Searchshore own the NIC Alexa brands, but Searchshore and NIC fund Electrical Safety First, who used to be NIC. It becomes a bit of a mishmash mess, to be
Well,
honest with you. So
I can't help but feel that these original companies were started for the right reasons.
yes, they were
They were started
absolutely.
for the right reasons. There were things that they needed to do, and they wanted to do things right. And over the years, it kind of feels like they've lost their way. And this is obviously just from an installer's point of view. It feels like they've lost their way, and it's become about profit rather than anything else. Because whenever I try to talk to somebody or talk to a company and say, look, this is what I feel is wrong with the industry. Look, there's people that feel the same as me. They all have the same default answer. We have to offer those courses because everyone else does. We can't kick people off the scheme because they'll just go to another scheme. It's not our fault. It's everybody's fault. They're all doing the same thing. So we have to fall in line. And nobody's prepared to say, do you know what? We're not happy with this anymore. We realize a mistake has been made. Let's fix it. Everybody just seems to want to keep their head below the parapet and not, put their neck on the line.
I don't disagree with you at all, in all fairness. So just on that, just while you've been talking, so the NIC EIC, their history, according to their own website, 1956. They were set up with 14 area engineers because there used to be 14 electricity boards back in the good old day.
Yeah.
And they had the first roll of approved contractors published in 1957. It was 3,500 contractors. In 1971, they were registered as a charity. Brilliant. 1986, they moved to London. In 1988, they formed NQA, National Quality Assurance, which was a positive step. And quality in electrical contracting can only be a good thing. Then in 92, 16th edition came out. In 1998, the NIC roll was published on a CD-ROM. I remember that. And then in 2000, the NIC became a UCAS accredited certification body. And I think that's where everything started to go terribly wrong, because in 2005, it says quite clearly the charity was renamed Electrical Safety Council and started to carry out the charitable objectives of the NIC EIC. Charities are about fundraising, aren't they? So where's NIC Group formed to carry out the commercial aspects of the NIC EIC, and then they moved to Dunstable in 2006, and then in 2009 they renamed the trading group as Assertiva. Yeah, Assertiva then merged with ECA to form Searchshore, which then owns the NIC EIC trading brand with Alexa. Do you know what? Was any of it necessary? No.
Well, someone said to me,
Yep.
and I don't know how true this is, and I don't know if I'm getting this the right way around, but they said the NIC, EIC used to be on the side of the homeowner. The ECA used to be on the side of the employer, and the JIB used to be on the side of the employee. And they all used to be separate, and they all used to look out for that particular part of the industry. And now I can't help but see that they're all linked.
They are inherently linked by finance. The ECA formed in 1901 as a trade association. They're a non-for-profit company. Okay, so if they're a non-for-profit, they can't fund the electrical safety first activities, but they do own Searchshore, which are a marketing organisation. It's like with most parts of the electrical industry now, they seem to have lots of subcomponents and parties. I do agree. I mean, years ago when I first heard of them, everything had a divide. The JIB were for the sparks. And in fairness, the JIB still act and speak to the sparks as for the sparks because they are a brand. The NIC, I always saw them as for the contractor and the homeowner, although I was never really quite sure. The ECA, I always saw them as the big contractors, the NG Baileys, the T Clarks, the Drake and Sculls, if you're old enough to remember all them. This was the big guys, did all the strategic stuff. But over the years, they've all come under that umbrella of the ECA, which, yes, they are separate in their activities and their goals and their strategies and their mission, but fundamentally they are linked because
Mm.
there is no way in hell you're going to get a industry round table where you've got the ECA, the NIC, Electrical Safety First, and the JIB disagreeing with each other. They won't. They fundamentally won't, because the guy at the very top is going to turn around and say, this is our policy. This is where we want the industry to go. Ryan calls it the old boys club, and this is where we want. This is where we want it to be. And they've lost out on having the difficult discussions, which is individual competence needs to be looked at in our industry, training and qualification routes, protection of the public.
Mm.
What
Well,
body protects the public?
I've got a question, controversial question maybe. Is there a difference? Does the industry see domestic as a lower form of electricity compared to industrial?
Okay, so having done industrial and domestic, I can tell you now, in my experience, industrial guys look down massively on domestic guys, sparks, as just bootlace guys because they're tiny little cables. Having done both, I can tell you now, and I think some people will agree with me, when you go from industrial to domestic, it's like starting again. Yes, you know your principles if you've got to run a cable from A to B, but there are so many quirks and nuances of domestic that you have to learn. You are going on an educational journey. If you go from domestic to industrial, holy cow, it's a massive, massive step up, because in domestic houses, you're not doing steel conduits, ladder racks, big armoreds, panels, static switches, and changeovers. But the same can be said, just miniaturized in reverse. So having done both, they are, to me, both. When I walk into a wholesaler and I see a house basher, I don't mean a house basher in a derogatory term. I look at him and I go, that man's going to earn his money today. He's going to knock his pipe out, lifting up boards, looking after Mrs. Jones' carpets, having to deal with her pets, having to wire some intricate control system, or putting in a fan extract, or working in a loft, or under a floorboard, or in the bloody rain, or having to sort out someone's earthing. An industrial spark may just spend 2 years just bending pipe, or bolting 10 mil bolts together, or you know what I mean? And then you could argue that's not sparking, that's just Meccano building.
Well, I see so many, or hear so many people look down on domestic electricians as it is a lower form of electrical work. And
yeah, but they're sad, lowly, and pathetic people, in all fairness.
well, do you know, you hear it from, I've spoken to people about those short courses, and I don't want to bring that back up because we've already covered it, but they say, oh, well, that's okay because it's in the domestic sector. It's not going to affect us in the industrial. But actually, there are courses that then enable those people to go into the industrial. And I can't help feel that like the ECA, for instance, look after the big industrial contracts, and they care about that. And then the domestic is kind of like an afterthought. And it's okay to practice in people's homes. You know, the homeowner don't know any different. We're all under the Part P banner. You've got someone that's done 9 weeks training and someone who's done 4 years training or whatever, but we're all bannered together under one brand. And I just can't help feel that the public are getting a raw deal.
I don't disagree with you. I think the trouble is the public, all they care about is cost. Okay, so I'm going to have a weird point of view on this. So I am obsessed with maintaining my house. Why? Because I bought a house where I got a report and it said everything's fine and dandy, and then the roof fell in. I had to pay thousands for a new roof. I ended up rewiring it myself. The wiring was deadly, and it burnt me so much, cost me 80 grand, which I'm still recovering from to this day.
Wow.
It burnt me so badly that every time I looked, when I was house hunting, I'd look at a house and everything you could straight away see wasn't maintained, was papered over, was painted over. And so I'm obsessed with maintenance and keeping up good standards of repair. And in the domestic world, that means money, and people are struggling to pay their bills because and it's another thing I don't understand. People will pay out for a widescreen TV, an £80 a month phone contract, but they won't pay out to maintain their electrics.
It's bragging
They'll
rights.
argue.
It's bragging rights. I've spent 50 grand on my kitchen, and everyone goes, wow, that's an amazing kitchen. It's 50 grand. But when it comes to how much did it cost to put that in, they want the lowest cost. Oh, we only paid £1,000 and it's all put in for £1,000. And then people were impressed. Wow, you only paid £1,000. Wow.
Yeah,
So you've got a
makes a
50 grand
difference. Yeah.
kitchen and you only paid £1,000 to put it in. Well done. High fives.
Yeah, it is. It is a weird one. I've seen it before. When I've had contractors come in and give me quotes. I once had an electrical contractor come in and give me quotes for my house, and I had to stop him because he was just lying through his back teeth. And I actually said to him, "Look, I am a qualified electrician, but I'm arthritic and a bit rusty." And it's amazing how much his cost came down because he was just lying through the back teeth. And there is a problem. There are people who will rip people off. There are others who will just charge a fair day's money plus materials. It's very difficult to suss them out nowadays, to be honest with you, because everybody hides behind badges.
Well, I can't help feel sorry for all those guys that I see on social media that, they're just trying to earn an honest living. They're just trying to be good electricians, good
Yeah,
people. I just feel like we're getting shafted, if I'm completely honest with you. As long as you tick a box, everything's a-okay.
yeah, no, I don't disagree. To be honest with you, as long as I remember going into many a house and saying, right, sorry, madam, I need to lift up your carpet, and they go, what? Well, I need to get a power supply in for that. I wasn't told that when I was sold the boiler. I wasn't told this. Well, you can't get invisible cables. It's not electricity. You need to get a cable, a wire in from here and here. You can't lift up my carpet. You'll have to do this, and you'll have to run conduit out the back of the house or something stupid. People get people nationally, and this is where the industry bodies could really do something. We've just had Grenfell, and as it stands, the firemen have been thrown under the bus in that
Yeah,
report, which is
I
absolutely
completely
fucking
disagree with
ridiculous.
that. Yeah,
It's fucking ridiculous, to be perfectly frank.
out of order.
Anyone who criticised firemen and all they're trying to do is the right thing. Now they're saying it was because of the stay put policy. Well, in theory, a stay put policy would work if the building was maintained and all the
If the building had
compartmentation
been, yeah,
was
the build,
recorded, and there were
yeah,
heavy fines for people who altered it. But they didn't do that because nobody gave a shite. So the
mm,
fire brigade get blamed for that. And the fire brigade are under pressure anyway, since when the fire regulations changed in 2005 and they threw away all the fire certificates and the needs for checks and all the rest of it. And the government are to blame for that. The
yeah.
HSE are to blame for that because the government, have told the HSE we need to make construction leaner, cost leaner.
Did you
What
see
can
that video that I put on social media about the house building in the 60s? Basically, the government had to fulfill a criteria, build
Oh
half a
God.
million homes. This has been going on since the 60s, with house
Yeah.
builders, basically big contractors. They take the public money, spend it, and then when it all goes wrong, the taxpayers left foot in the bill. And this is no new thing, Paul. This is
Yeah,
still
what
going
was the
on
name of that
today.
program so people can look it up on YouTube again? Can you remember what
Oh,
it was?
I'll find it for you. Hang on. Go on, you keep talking and
Okay.
I'll.
So yeah, with Grenfell, just going back to Grenfell, it's desperate when there's a report now that's come out that says there was a white goods, a fridge, loose connection that's caused the fire. But we're not talking about the electrical industry. We're not talking about the white goods industry. We're not talking about the cladding anymore. We're talking about the firemen, the people who run into burning buildings to save people's lives to do the right thing. Absolutely reprehensible. The fire service have been decimated. Again, I'm not making this a political statement by the then Mayor of London, because the austerity for the last 15 years. I'm old enough now to realise that what we seem to have now is austerity and recession, where we cut, 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 because it's like someone in the Bank of England is on this mad saving thing where they're saving up billions. And then the next government comes in and goes, great, let's just throw money. Because I remember Tony Blair, right? And this is why I will never vote Labour. Labour and Tony Blair spent 3 terms in office absolutely spunking money at everything and anything, and they moved all the working class to middle class, free money for everything, New Deal this, New Deal that, and they absolutely bankrupted us. And then the Conservatives came in and went, oh, we're broke. We're now going to have to do austerity, and everyone's calling it Conservative wankers for austerity, but it's a vicious cycle. It doesn't
Mm,
matter what government, it's a vicious cycle of like a generational cycle of 3 parliament terms where they just seem to spend too much, save it for 10, 15 years, and then go and I guarantee you now, this next election, whoever wins, I really hope Labour don't win, will just spunk money on everything and anything.
they all seem to be in for the short-term gain, the
Yes.
long-term loss.
Yep.
And they all seem to be aiming for the same thing. I don't trust any of them. They're all full of rubbish. But
Yeah, let's
I've
not get
just
into
found that
politics.
no, I've just found that YouTube video. It's called The Inquiry: The Great British Housing Disaster by Adam Curtis, 1984.
So the inquiry, the Great British Housing Disaster, 1984. It's on YouTube,
Mm,
and it is a mind melting, eye watering documentary where you sit now wherever you are and you look at the social injustices and you think this is a new thing. Somebody's got to get in trouble. You watch that documentary and you go, there is nothing new about this.
no,
MPs have been lining their pockets and feathering their nests, and major contractors have been taking public money, building empires, making mistakes, and getting away scot free.
mm. And
And
the
that I
public foot the
find
bill.
mind blowing. Yep,
Mm,
and it kind of explains. I hold contractors at work to, if I pay the money, I hold them to a decent job and all the paperwork. And I can tell you now, it gets very difficult when you're saying to a contractor, "I'm not paying you that," and they go, "But why? We're finished." No, you're not. Get the quality right. Get the paperwork right. And I have in my career, not where I currently am, had contractors just walk away
mm.
from thousands of pounds because they couldn't be asked. They didn't like the fact that there was a client with a brain who actually knew more than about the electrical industry than they did.
In the last 3 years, Paul, and this, I don't know if I'm the only person that thinks this, but I'm starting to think that people have got used to that low standard. It's almost like it's become the norm. People don't question it anymore. As long as it works, job done. Have you seen anything like that?
Sorry, say that again.
So I've seen with the decline of, well, in my opinion, in the decline of electrical work, the standard of electrical work, the public have actually come to see it as the norm. It's become standard, commonplace, and they kind of accept it.
Um, I think okay, so I'll be a bit controversial. So I met
Well,
someone who made a valid point who'd been in the industry 50 years, and he said, and I completely agree with it. Don't think for 1 minute the electrical industry's been in decline for 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. The electrical industry has been in decline for the last 30 years.
oh,
It
I
has
agree with that.
it has declined decade after decade after decade because of the need for numbers of electricians or labourers, or it hasn't helped all of the strike actions, the blacklisting. I mean, the Jubilee Line extension. I could tell you horror stories of what electricians were doing there, and then they all got blacklisted. There's a surprise. Um, some of the behaviors, you wouldn't want that electrician working for you. We're the last trade in, so greed is very easy a thing to come across on commercial industrial sites. I think the public is starting to get more aware and they're starting to question more. And I think in the last 3 to 5 years, social media has made nothing a secret. And this is where I think our industry is absolutely up shit's creek, to be perfectly frank, because none of the industry bodies get social media. They don't understand it. They choose to ignore it. And yet we now have thousands of electricians who are talking to each other, no matter where they are in the UK, sharing their knowledge, just chit chatting, whatever. And the industry bodies don't get it. They don't
Mm.
understand it
Well,
because
this
it's
is
always
one of the
been, we're the
reasons.
controlling mind.
Yeah, well, this is why I'm glad actually for social media. Like I said, look, 3 years ago when I changed my company name and I joined social media, I came across you, Paul, and the E5 group, and the
Oh yeah,
E5
we're just a
hashtag.
rabble.
Well, yeah, but I found like-minded people. Before that, I actually felt like I was alone in the world, and no one cared about electrics as much as
Oh
I did.
really?
Yeah, that's the point. That's why I was thinking about selling. That's why I changed my name. I was just fed up with wading knee deep through that,
Well,
that
for
industry.
me, it always comes back to this one old boy who I met when my first struggling to learn. I went to Edgware Hospital and did 2 weeks work experience. Okay, now that's before I got my apprenticeship, and I was going around changing batteries in fire alarms and various bits, working with some electricians, just volunteered. And I remember this old boy who sat down next to me. He was about 60 odd, and he went, "All right, boy," and I was like, "Yeah, yeah," and he went, "Yeah, industry's fucked. It's all shit. La 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 la." And I was like, "Okay, well, have you fucked it? You're a miserable bastard, you are. Jesus Christ, do something about it if it's all fucked." And I thought to myself, do you know what? Those people are really negative and they drag you down. So I always swore blind that if I could get into a position where I could do something to reverse the damage, I was duty bound to do it. And I consider myself very fortunate having won a medal this week
Yes, well,
for my efforts.
congratulations for that,
Oh,
by the
do
way.
you know
I'm
what,
immensely
mate? I'm
proud.
totally blown away. I literally sat in that theatre with my eyes closed, knowing I would not win. And when they announced my name, I was stunned. But I always thought I would do something about it. And the fact of it is, I'm lucky in the respects of I don't have kids, I don't have a huge family to look after, so I can spend my time volunteering, helping individuals, and showing people that there are people that do care, that aren't in this industry for money. Because everybody, when we first started E5, everyone was going, oh, it's about money, you're going to set up a CPS. No, we're fucking not going to set up a CPS. There's enough CPSs out there, and let's be perfectly frank, do we want to offer a commentary on that state? Why would I want to join that state? No, I'd rather do something different, and I'd rather do it individual, because if you can influence individuals, you can do a hell of a lot more. And
Well,
I
this is
think we've
why I got
proven
into
that.
training. This is one of my reasons why I got into training. We met 3 years ago on social
Mm.
media. I was there when it first started, and um, I was moaning about it a lot. I was incredibly angry
Were
at the
you?
time. Well, yeah, massively, massively
A pure
angry.
electric moaning
Ma-
on social media,
ma-
heaven forbid.
yeah, so I was massively angry about it, and then
You're
after
entitled.
about after 2 years of moaning, I suddenly started listening and then realizing, do you know what? All this moaning isn't getting anyone anywhere.
Nope.
The only way that I can do something about it is by being the change, which is one of the
Yep.
reasons why I thought if I can influence the learners coming into the industry and tell them there's a better way of doing it and show them the right way of doing it, then at least I'm doing my bit. So that was one of my motivators.
And you're absolutely right. You can't sit and moan about something, because other than venting for your own stress relief purposes, it gets you nowhere. But if you can find a way to be the change, and this is why I always say you can do amazing things just by your own meek and candid behaviour. And people don't. I never. It was only from. I mean, I've done so many talks now and lectures where people have genuinely come up to me, and I've been blown away by the feedback. And I've never thought much of myself as an individual, other than I care and I'm going to try my best. And do you know what? If in 20 years' time there are loads and loads of people running around this country going, oh yeah, I remember Paul Meenan, I saw him talk 15 years ago, and he helped set me on a path where I've got a good business and good principles, and I've surrounded myself with good. I'll be over the moon, to be honest with you. I
Yeah, no,
don't want. I
absolutely.
don't want to. People keep saying you're going to take over, nap it, or NIC. No, why would I?
Well,
What's
anger's
the
a good
point?
thing to get us started. It's always that we're a
Passion.
reactive. We're yeah,
If we
we're a reactive rather than proactive society, aren't we?
if we can use our anger and convert it into passion. The only
Yeah.
thing I will say is since we started, there's been a lot of angry people who have wanted immediate change, and this is why I say to everybody, if you want immediate change, go and talk to a brick wall, because all the voluntary regulatory bodies are private charities, non-for-profits, or limited companies. They don't answer to us. They don't have to answer to us. And the only way they will ever listen to us is if we vote with our mouths and our feet. As you rightly did, you walked away from your professional, your business accreditation, because you realised there was no benefit to you. Now, if thousands of people did that, they would have to relook at their strategies and their business models.
Mm.
Unfortunately, everybody sees the logo.
Well, I always thought you had to be registered. That's what was drummed into us.
No, I'm
But
not
you don't.
registered.
No,
I'm
you
not
don't have
registered.
to be registered. You can register straight directly to building control. You
My
can obviously
last
do third
house,
party certification
my
now.
my last house, I rewired my last house top to bottom. He killed me, bless it. And I went to local council. I brought all my qualifications, copies, and the originals, and I submitted the certificate. And the guy went, "Yep, fill in that form." So I did, Part B notification, and he said it was £280. I said, "Not a chance in hell, I'm not paying you. Here's all my qualifications. Happy to see you in court as a president." He
Mm.
went, "What?" I said, "I'm happy to set a precedent with Hertfordshire County Council for you to sue me for non-compliant with Part P, and then I'm going to stand up in front of a judge and say I've got 16 sitting guilds, chartered fellow of the IET. I do this teaching, I do this, blah 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 blah. Please come and snag my work, and we'll see whether Part P is valid or not." And they went, "Oh well, we only need the money to pay a contractor to come out." Now, my very first house, I had that when I rewired it, and they sent me a kitchen fitter who'd done a 5-day course, who I
Mm.
ended up teaching testing to for the whole day.
Well, I'm going to say something controversial now, because a lot of people
Well,
probably
we're an
won't.
hour in, so nobody will
Yeah,
be listening anymore. So
no, no, no. So they probably won't agree with me. But as far as I'm aware, and as far as I can prove and look, research online, Part P is the homeowner's responsibility. And
yes,
I
it is.
spoke to building control about this, and they agree that it's Part P, it's the homeowner's responsibility. And that's why there's only been one or two prosecutions since 2005. As long as if you're qualified and you've tested and you've issued your certificate and you've given that to the homeowner, you've complied with the electricity at work regulations. And Part P is a completely separate entity to that.
Part P is known as part pointless, and I genuinely believe it is part pointless. But I don't know if you remember now. It's a bit of history for you. When Part P first came out, it was withdrawn about within 4 weeks of coming out, very quickly, because Part P used to have, I think it was 2 or 3 sections in it, and one of the sections it was withdrawn to delete was one about individual competence.
Mm.
And it bleated on about individual electricians being individually assessed for competence. And I remember reading it going, "Whew, this is, I wish to God I still had a copy." And it
Yeah.
went on about individual competence, and that got literally snapped and withdrawn and removed completely. That would have made a huge difference, because what I don't understand is the industry bodies out there, they see on social media, they see all the reports, industry quality is getting worse, fires are going up, we're introducing AFDDs which will by default mitigate fires because they do actually work, but we just need to rethink the way we select protection. So there's upskilling needed there, but they're not acknowledging the fact that the industry is in a competence crisis
Mm.
and doing it about. I mean, in the ECA Today magazine, the chief exec actually basically talks about individual competence and effectively says that'll never work.
Mm.
Well, that's a bad attitude to have. That's an
Well,
horrendous attitude to have.
look at all these wooden fuse boards we used to have, and none of them used to catch fire. And
No,
then
they
if you
didn't.
look at Part P's come out, and then gradually over time fires have increased in consumer units,
Yes.
and all of a sudden we're having to fit metal
plastic
ones.
plastic consumer units catching fire, so we went metal. And the reports on the recommendation, there were a number of plastic consumer units that were fire rated,
Mm.
so you can actually get a fire resistant plastic consumer unit with certain materials that won't catch fire, they won't burn, like you get LSOH cables and stuff like that. And I don't think they were part of the assessment criteria when they did their metal boards. But I agree with the principle of metal boards, because we went to metal boards, then to plastic to save money, and then
I prefer
back
them
to metal.
myself. I think they're a
Personally, I
better
prefer.
product.
Yeah, I think metal boards are better. I think boards are hopefully going to get better and better. They're going to get smarter. My only worry about the modern boards now is the hidden energy costs of all the electronics in them, which
Mm.
I think is another issue for another podcast.
Well, I saw a report for the Part P when they were talking about watering it down, and taking a lot of the notifiable stuff out. And I think there were three, I think I'm correct in saying this, there were three um, ideas put forward. One was to do nothing and leave things as they were, and that would be expensive to everybody. Then there was to restrict the amount of Part P notification. And then there was one that was going to leave it because we've got enough RCDs now in the system, the magical RCD that fixes everything and saves lives. And with enough RCDs in the industry now that it was safe enough. I'm trying to remember what that report was now. I've probably got it somewhere, Paul.
The Department for Trade and Industry is a very interesting place to go and look at reports that are buried. There's a great one on DC effects of within domestic installations, or on meters and various other components, which for obvious reasons has been buried. Another reason why I won't have a smart meter, but that's and again another podcast. But the one thing that the people listening here can do, other than go, "Oh my God, this Adrian and Paul, God, they don't half moan a lot." CPD,
Oh,
CPD,
absolutely. That
continuous
was one of the things
professional
I had
development.
down.
It's absolutely key. Now, you don't have to go on a formal training course, and just for the avoidance of doubt, CPD, the IET have a great term called T waves, which is training, work experience, academic study, volunteering, events and seminars, and self-study. So reading a book, reading a journal, reading digital information sources, internet research, discussion forums, volunteering, whether you're professionally volunteering or within your local networks or in colleges or FE, doing a degree, doing a HNC, sitting in guilds, formal training, technical courses, specialist courses, EV courses, distance learning, webinars, bidding and tendering, commercial knowledge, project management knowledge, learning new skills, coaching, job shadowing, managing projects, going to conferences, speaking at conferences, doing technical visits, going to Alex seminars, listening to this podcast. Technically, you could say on some of them are CPD, where you can actually declare them as points.
Well,
Some of them.
one of the things I would get through to anybody listening to this podcast is don't do what I did. I qualified. That was my end goal. Once that was done, I thought I'd achieved what I needed to achieve, and I stagnated for 15 years, and didn't push on with the CPD. And my knowledge, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I'm very practical heavy at the moment. I'm having to relearn all the science and principles again. But I tell my learners every week or every opportunity, don't make the same mistake. You've always got to be moving forward, because if you don't, you're going backwards.
Just on that, so I'm going to have to go on that journey that you're on soon enough, because my plan in life is to, when I get to 60, is to stop working in contracting, construction, wherever I am, and go into college and give back. I want to spend 5 years lecturing, and I know at the age of 60 I'm going to have to start learning all my science and principles again and all the rest of it, but hopefully we'll be able to bring a wealth of knowledge to the youngsters, and do that until I hit 65, and then just fade out doing voluntary stuff, probably for the IET or CIBSE or IAM or whoever whoever wants my wisdom and knowledge for free. So that's my plan. So I'm eventually going to give back in that respect, and I'm dreading it. I am dreading it, because I can go to colleges, I can talk about what I know, but I've sat and listened to college bits and I've gone, oh my God, I can't remember any of that. Oh wow, all that drawing on the formulas on the board. Okay, I know my adiabatics, I know enough to get me through the arguments, but yeah, there's a lot, isn't there? There's a hell of a lot to this trade.
Yeah, and I think people just need to remember, the qualification isn't the end of it. You just have to keep pushing on, keep learning.
Indeed, and advice for anyone who is still listening: don't ever stop learning. CPD is not a formal training course your boss sends you on. It's reading the manual of the bit of kit you've got to install and remembering it. The key to CPD is actually reflecting. If you do a training course and you remember it 2 years later, it was a good course. If you learn a piece of knowledge that will stay with you for life, it was a good course. Now, I have done courses that I can't remember who the bloody bloke training was, what the course was about. I just remember I went to do it. I remember nothing from it. The ones I do remember are the ones where it was engaging, there was passion, there was good knowledge, good means of describing the situation. Because I like to consider myself, I'm a chartered engineer, which is the equivalent of a master's. I don't have a master's, and I still consider myself an idiot. Because it grounds me, man. It keeps me grounded.
You've got to stay grounded. The moment you think you know everything, that's the moment you've lost it.
And there's a podcast in itself, how not to be an arsehole in our industry, because there are some absolute arrogant tosspots wandering around our industry, bigging themselves up. I will never big myself up, because I'm not stupid enough to big myself up. And the minute you think you're good, you lose your edge. And I don't want to lose my edge, because then I'm no use to anybody.
Well, then as well, if you're at that point, the only way that you can maintain your position is to keep everyone below you, and surround yourself with people that are idiots, basically. So that
that's not me. I would rather empower people and watch them go off and grow and do their thing, and just sit back and go, oh, I had an in on that. I had an idea of that, and there are things in this industry, trust me, which I can now sit back and go, that was my idea. I wonder where they got that idea from. But I'm quite happy the fact that there are different things coming about, and slowly at the end of the day. Remember, I work full time. All the E5 guys work full time. I think over the next couple of years we're going to step it up, and I think we're going to expand what we're doing with the people we're doing things with as well.
Small steps, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Well, the slower you build something, the stronger it'll be. If you throw it up too quickly, it falls down just as quick.
It is very hard, because we've started before and we tried to run before we could walk, and we've experienced the greed and the negativity of individuals, and the wants and the whims and the people. But a lot of people have tried to pollute E5 with what they want, and it's not about what they want.
Well, one way I see this of lasting for a long time is for individual installers, the electricians out there, to see what we're trying to do, and try and be the change. If we can maintain it, then it doesn't matter what everyone else does. It doesn't matter what these corporations try to do above us. If we maintain it and we believe in it, then it'd be much more difficult for them to force us to do it wrong.
But that is the thing. I mean, the one thing about E5 is that the influence and inspire part of our values, it is the influence and inspire the individuals. For me, I don't get me wrong, I would love to sit on a table with the ECA and the NIC and say, guys, I think you could do this a lot better. I think it would make a massive difference to the money that electricians can earn. I think it would create a ring fence around quality guys who upskill. And I think it would highlight to the public how to spot the cowboys. That's what I think the industry should be doing.
Everyone would win.
They won't talk to us.
Everyone would win, though. If
they won't talk to us.
Good training and you've got good installers and you've got good companies and you can charge more money because everyone respects what you do.
The problem is I think the problem is some of the industry bodies have issues with Ryan and Ryan's blogs and stuff. And Ryan's blogs are true. And Ryan's part of our family, so he's not going anywhere, we're not going anywhere, and at some point eventually people will wise up and realize that we all go on journeys of maturing and we grow and we evolve.
Their journey.
Exactly. And
well, this has been a good podcast, Paul. I mean, we spoke about training, we've spoke about the schemes, we've talked about the industry, we talked about E5, and we finished on CPD.
Yes, and the individual listening. Now, hopefully somebody is probably about to get out their van, having listened to us ramble while driving from Manchester to Leeds or wherever they are listening to this. But for me, have you got any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Not right now. I think we've covered everything that I kind of feel passionate about. I just want, at the end of the day, all I care about is the electricians that are doing their jobs properly, and the public.
Indeed, and that for me is the number one goal. Actually, is the public. Interestingly enough, my last bit was when I was at that the IET awards ceremony. I met the new president of the IET, Peter Bonifield, and he was very obsessed with individual competence of electricians, and in general the trades. Which I said to him, "Oh my goodness, you're going to be a hated man in the industry," and he didn't care. He was actually quite up for the challenge because he actually said that industry has failed.
But if you don't police something, then people take advantage.
Yeah, I know, and I think I'd be interested to see where we take the IET Eng Tech electrician thing in there, because the IET are obviously going to be developing their own register of electricians, and I think as long as it stays independent and there's a high qualitative criteria and is owned by the IET, then I think that could hopefully be something quite good.
Well, as with anything, Paul, if you give something away too easily, you devalue it, you make it worthless.
Mate, listen.
I personally want to be associated with the best of the best. That's where I want to be. I want to set myself up at that level, and I appreciate that there's people that want to be lower down. They're not that fussed. But that's where I would want to be. They need to have something for people like us that want to be associated with the quality of the industry, the best the industry has to provide.
Yeah, we have to accept there are people who don't want to get along. They just want to turn up and do their hours and get home. That's fine.
That's fine.
As long as they don't drag others down with them, I haven't got a problem with that. But it would be nice to have more injected passion and enthusiasm.
It's gone too far the wrong way.
Sorry?
It's gone too far the wrong way, in my opinion.
Massively. I mean, I'm trying to encourage more people to come off the tools who want to into management to fight the battles within the civil engineering and the client sides, because there are more people needed to educate clients, educate tier one contractors that the way they procure electricians and their works are just fundamentally flawed. Every single time ever I've been, somebody's gone along and done a project and they've gone, oh, I've procured the electrical contractor, and you just, first thing I do is roll my eyeballs and go, right, what mess have we got ourselves into now? So yeah, more people should be able to do it. If you've got some common sense in you, you'll succeed, I think.
Yeah.
Right, and on that bombshell, Adrian, I'm sure we'll do another one at some point. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, Paul.
Awesome. And for those listening, sorry for boring you. Until the next podcast, take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.
Bye.